The beginning of things. The oldest stories of every race of people tell about the beginning of things. But the various folk who first told them were so very different. The tales are so very old, and have changed so greatly in the telling from one generation to another, that there are almost as many accounts of the way in which the world began as there are nations upon this earth. So it is not strange that the people of the north have a legend of the beginning quite different from that of southern, eastern, and western folk. This book is made of the stories told by the northern folk, the people who lived in the land of the midnight sun, where summer is green and pleasant, but winter is a terrible time of cold and gloom, where rocky mountains tower like huge giants, over whose heads the thunder rolls and crashes, and under whose feet are mines of precious metals. Therefore you'll find the tale of giant and dwarf, spirits of cold mountain and dark cavern. You will find the hero to be Thor, with his thunderbolt hammer, who dwells in the happy heaven of Asgard, where Father Odin is king, and where Balder the Beautiful makes springtime with his smile. In the north countries, winter, cold, and frost are very real and very terrible enemies, while spring, sunshine, and warmth are near and dear friends. So the story of the beginning of things is a story of cold and of heat, of the wicked giants who loved the cold, and of the good Aesir who basked in pleasant warmth. In the very beginning of things, the stories say, there were two worlds, one of the burning heat and one of the icy cold. The cold world was in the north, and from it flowed Ylvaga, a river of poisonous water, which hardened into ice and piled itself into great mountains, filling the space which had no bottom. The other world in the south was on fire with bright flame, a place of heat most strong and terrible. And in those days, through all space there was nothing beside these two worlds of heat and of cold. And then began fierce combat. Heat and cold met and strove to destroy one another, as they have tried to do ever since. Flaming sparks from the hot would fall upon the ice river which flowed from places of cold. And though the bright sparks were quenched, in dying they wrought mischief, as they do today, for they melted the ice, which dripped and dripped, like tears from the suffering world of cold. And then, wonderful to say, these chilly drops became alive. They became huge, breathing mass. Frost giant with a wicked heart of ice. And he was the ancestor of all the giants who came afterwards, a dark and cruel race. At that time there was no earth, nor sea, nor heaven, nothing but the icy abyss without bottom, whence Ymir the giant had sprung. And here he lived, nourished by milk of cow, which the heat had formed. Now the cow had nothing for her food but the snow and ice of Ylvaga, and that was cold victuals indeed. One day as she licked the icy rocks, which tasted salty to her, when Ymir noticed the mass was taking strange shape. The more the cow licked it, the plainer became the outline of the shape. And when evening came, Ymir saw thrusting itself through the icy rock a head of hair. The next day the cow went on with her meal, and at that night time a man's head appeared above the rock. On the third day the cow licked away the ice until forth stepped a man, tall and powerful and handsome. This was no evil giant. He was good, and strangely, though he came from ice, his heart was warm. He was the ancestor of all the kind Aesir, for all Father Odin and his brothers Vili and Ve, the first of the gods, were his grandsons. and as soon as they were born, they became the enemies of the race of giants. Now after a few giant years, ages and ages of time as we reckon it, there was great battle, for Odin and his brothers wished to destroy the evil in the world, and to leave only the good. They attacked the wicked giant Ymir, first of all his race, and after hard fighting slew him. Ymir was so huge, when he died a mighty river of blood flowed forth from the wounds which Odin had given him, a stream so large that it flooded all space, and the frost giants, his children and grandchildren, all were drowned, except one who escaped with his wife in a chest, and but for the saving of these two, that would have been the end of the race of giants. All-Father and his brothers now had work to do. Painfully they dragged the great bulk of Ymir into the bottomless space of ice, and from his body they built the earth, the sea, and the heavens. Not an atom of his body went to waste. His blood made great oceans, rivers, and lakes, springs and valleys. His mighty bones became the mountains. His teeth and broken became sand and pebbles. From his skull they fashioned the arching heaven, which they set up over the earth and over the sea. His brain became the heavy clouds, and his hair sprouted into trees, grass, plants, and flowers. And last of all the Aesir set his bristling eyebrows as a high fence around the earth, to keep the giants away from the race of men whom they had planned to create for this pleasant globe. So the earth was made, and next the gods brought light for the heavens. They carried the sparks and cinders blown from the world of heat, and set them here and there, above and below, as sun and moon and stars. To each they gave its name, and told them what its duties were to be, and how it must perform them, day after day, and year after year, and century after century, till the ending of all things, so that the children of men might reckon time without mistake. Sol and Mani, who drove the bright chariots of sun and moon across the sky, were a fair sister and brother, whose father named them Sun and Moon because they were so beautiful. So Odin gave them each a pair of swift bright horses to drive, and set them in the sky forever. Once upon a time, but that was many years ago, Mani, the man in the moon, stole 2 children from the earth, Huki and Bil, and were going to a well to draw a pole of water. The little boy and the girl carried a pole and a bucket across their shoulders, and looked so pretty that Mani thrust down a long arm and snatched them up to his moon. And there they are to this day, as you can see on any moonlit night, 2 little black shadows on the moon's bright face, boy and girl, with the bucket between them. The gods also made day and night. Day was fair, bright, and beautiful, for he was of the warm-hearted Aesir race. But night was dark and gloomy, because she was one of the cold giant folk. Day and night, each had a chariot drawn by swift horse, and each in turn drove about the world in a 24-hour journey. Night rode first behind her dark horse, Hrimfaxi, who scattered dew from his bit around the sleeping earth. After her came Day with his beautiful horse, Glad, whose shining mane shot rays of light through sky. All these wonders the kind gods wrought, that they might make a pleasant world for men to call their home. And now the gods, or Aesir as they were called, must choose a place for their own dwelling, for there were many of them, a glorious family, outside of everything, beyond the great ocean which surrounded the world, was Jotunheim, the cold country where giants lived. The green earth was made for men. The gods therefore decided to build their city above men, in the heavens, where they could watch the doings of their favorites, and protect them from the wicked giants. Asgard was to be their city, and from Asgard to Midgard, the home of men, stretched a wonderful bridge, a bridge of many colors. For it is the rainbow that we know and we love, and up and down the rainbow bridge the Aesir could travel to earth, and thus keep close to the doings of men. Next, from the remnants of Ymir's body, the gods made the race of dwarves, a wise and skilful folk, but in nature more like the giants than the good Aesir. For they were spiteful, and they were often wicked, and they loved the dark and the cold better than any warmth or light. They lived deep down below the ground in caves and rocky dens, and it was their business to dig out the precious metals and the glittering gems that were hidden in the rocks, and to make wonderful things from the treasures of the underworld. Poof, poof, poof went their little bellows. Tink, tink, tink went their little hammers on anvils day and night. Sometimes they were friendly to the giants, and sometimes they did kindly deeds for the Aesir. But always after men came upon the earth, they hated these new folk, who eagerly sought for the gold and the jewels which the dwarfs kept hidden deep underground. The dwarfs lost no chance of doing evil to the race of men. Now the gods were ready for the making of men. They longed to have a race of creatures whom they could love and protect and bless with their pleasures. So Odin, with his brother Hyrnir and brother Loki, crossed the rainbow bridge and came down to earth. There, walking along the seashore, when they found 2 trees, an ash and an elm. These would do as well as anything for their purpose, so Odin took the 2 trees and warmly breathed upon them, and lo, they were alive, a man and woman. Hyrnir then gently touched their foreheads, and they became wise and knew of self. Lastly, Loki stroked their faces, and their skin grew pink with ruddy color, and they received the gifts of speech, the gifts of hearing, and the gift of sight. Osk and Embla were their names, and the ash and the elm became the father and mother of the whole human race, whose dwelling was Midgard, under the eyes of the Aesir who had made them. And this is the story of the beginning of things.